I'm Corey Proffitt-Boyd, and this is Say It Anyway.
Say it anyway with Corey Proffitt-Boyd. Say it anyway. Say it anyway with Corey Proffitt-Boyd. Say it anyway.
Welcome back to Say It Anyway. I'm Corey Proffitt-Boyd, and today I want to talk about something that, if we're fortunate enough to experience along life, many of us will eventually face. It's something that can be incredibly rewarding, deeply exhausting, and almost impossible to explain to someone who hasn't lived it. I'm talking about being the caregiver for our parents. Before we begin, I want to mention something I always feel is important whenever we touch on subjects like this. I'm not a physician, a therapist, or a mental health professional, and this episode isn't intended to give medical or psychological advice. I'm simply sharing my own experience and my own perspective because sometimes hearing someone say, "I know what that feels like," can be more comforting than hearing someone tell you what you should do. If you're currently a caregiver, I hope you'll hear something today that reminds you you're not alone. And if you've already walked this road, perhaps you'll recognize parts of your own story and mine. And if your parents are still healthy and independent, maybe this conversation will encourage you to appreciate a few ordinary moments that one day won't feel ordinary at all. One of the strange things about life is that the biggest changes rarely announce themselves. We expect life-changing moments to arrive with dramatic music and flashing lights, but most of them slip quietly into our lives without asking permission. It can seem as though one day your parents are helping you move into your first apartment, reminding you to eat something besides frozen pizza, and asking if you remembered to lock the door. Then, years later, almost without realizing how you got there, you're standing in their kitchen reminding them to take their medicine before bed, or asking whether they've had enough water to drink today. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens a little bit at a time. A doctor recommends a cane. Someone stops driving after dark. A grocery trip becomes a little too tiring. Or a name takes just a little longer to remember. Individually, those moments don't seem life-changing. Together, they quietly rewrite the relationship you've known your entire life. Nobody really tells you what caregiving feels like. People might tell you it's difficult, and they're right. They might tell you it's rewarding, and that's true too. But neither of those words really seem big enough to hold the experience. Caregiving isn't one emotion. It's all of them, sometimes in the same afternoon. There are days when you'll leave a doctor's appointment feeling relieved because the news was better than you expected. Then you'll stop for groceries on your way home, hear a song on the radio that your parents used to listen to when you were little, and suddenly find yourself sitting in the parking lot wondering why you're crying. Not because anything terrible happened that day, just because your heart has been carrying so much for so long that it finally decided it needed a few minutes to catch up. One of the biggest surprises for me was discovering how much of caregiving happens in the ordinary moments. Movies make us think life is built around dramatic scenes, but really, life is usually much quieter than that. Real caregiving looks like sorting medications into little containers every Sunday evening. It looks like waiting in waiting rooms that somehow all smell exactly the same. It looks like learning which restaurants have the easiest entrances, remembering which chair is the most comfortable, and discovering that you suddenly know every pharmacist in town by their first name. It looks like calendars covered in appointments and phone numbers written on sticky notes. It looks like becoming an expert in things you never wanted to learn. But woven through all of those responsibilities are moments of incredible tenderness. You'll find yourself slowing down in ways you never expected. Conversations become longer because you're no longer rushing to the next thing. Sitting on the porch for half an hour suddenly feels like a perfectly reasonable way to spend an afternoon. You begin measuring a successful day differently. Instead of asking how much you accomplished, you start asking whether everyone is comfortable, whether they smiled today, and whether they felt loved. Life quietly teaches you a new definition of success. But you can certainly find joy in the middle of caregiving. One thing I don't think we talk about enough is that it can actually be funny. Funny because life has a remarkable way of finding little pockets of joy, even when things are hard. My mom had Parkinson's disease, and she lived with my spouse and me during the last years of her life. If you've ever cared for someone with a chronic illness, you know that there are difficult days. There are days that test your patience, your energy, and your heart. But there are also days when something completely ridiculous happens and everybody laughs until they can't breathe. Looking back, I don't remember every doctor's appointment. I don't remember every medication change, every difficult conversation. What I remember are the laughs. I remember watching television together. I remember teasing each other. I remember conversations that started somewhere sensible and somehow ended up with all of us laughing over something that really didn't make any sense at all. Those are the memories that stayed, and I'm grateful they did. Sometimes people assume caregiving is nothing but sadness, but it isn't. It's life. Life still keeps happening. Birthdays still come around. Somebody still burns dinner once in a while. The dog still does something ridiculous. The television remote still disappears into the couch cushions. Someone still tells the same story they've already told 20 times, and somehow it's still funny because of the way they tell it. I think it's one of the greatest gifts we can give the people we love. Not perfect care and not constant seriousness. Just permission to keep living, keep laughing, and keep making memories even while life is asking us to carry something heavy. Because illness may change someone's body. It doesn't erase who they are, though. They're still your mom or they're still your dad. They're still the person who embarrassed you in public, made your favorite meals, gave you advice you didn't ask for, and somehow knew exactly what was wrong when you insisted nothing was wrong at all. Those parts of them deserve to be celebrated just as much as they deserve to be cared for. There's another side of caregiving that doesn't get talked about very often, and it's the quiet loneliness that can come with it. When people ask how your parent is doing, it's because they genuinely care, and I'm always grateful for that. But after a while, I realized very few people asked the caregiver how they were doing. Not because they didn't care. I think it's because caregivers become so focused on making sure everyone else is okay that people naturally assume they're okay too. Sometimes we get so good at saying, "We're doing fine," that eventually everyone believes us. The truth is, there were days when I felt tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. There were days when I worried whether I was going to make the right decisions, whether I had missed something important, or whether I was doing enough. I think guilt follows a lot of caregivers around like an uninvited guest. You wonder if you should have been more patient, if you should have noticed something sooner. You wonder if you could somehow do more, even though you're already giving everything you've got. If you've ever felt that way, I want you to know something. The fact that you're worried about whether you're doing enough is actually evidence of just how deeply you love the person you're caring for. Love has a funny way of convincing us we should always be able to do more, but sometimes showing up every single day is already more than enough. Sometimes sitting beside someone, holding their hand, or simply making sure they don't have to face a difficult day alone is one of the greatest acts of love we'll ever offer another human being. And maybe we don't hear that often enough. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to talk about something I didn't fully understand until after my caregiving journey had ended. It wasn't about hospitals or medications or doctor's appointments. It was about the unexpected gifts that caring for my parents left behind, and why I believe those ordinary days became some of the most meaningful days of my life. Let's talk about it right after this commercial break. Welcome back to Say It Anyway. Before the break, we talked about the responsibilities of caregiving, the exhaustion that can come with it, and the unexpected joy that somehow finds its way into even the most difficult seasons of life. But there's another part of this journey that I don't think anyone can truly prepare you for, because you don't recognize it until you're looking back. When you're in the middle of caring for someone, It's easy to believe that life has become one long list of responsibilities. There's another appointment next week, another prescription to pick up, another phone call to make, and another insurance form to fill out. Your calendar becomes so full of practical things that you can lose sight of what is quietly happening underneath it all. You're making memories. The strange thing is, they don't feel like memories while you're living them. They just feel like a normal day. I can still picture sitting in the living room with my mom while the television played in the background. Sometimes we were talking, sometimes we weren't. Sometimes we'd laugh over something completely ridiculous, and other times we'd simply enjoy the comfort of being in the same room together without feeling the need to fill every silence with conversation. Back then, those afternoons felt ordinary, and today I would give anything for one more ordinary afternoon with her. It's amazing how life changes your definition of extraordinary. When we're younger, we think the moments we'll remember forever will be the big ones. The vacations, graduations, celebrations. And those moments certainly matter, but as I've gotten older, I've realized that some of the most meaningful memories are the ones that never made it into a photo album, because nobody thought to take a picture. So if your parents are still here, my wish for you is that you resist the temptation to wait for a special occasion to spend time with them. The ordinary Tuesday you're tempted to postpone may someday become the memory you treasure most. One thing I hope every caregiver can grow to understand is that love doesn't erase exhaustion. Somewhere along the way, many of us begin believing that if we're tired, frustrated, or overwhelmed, it must mean we're doing something wrong. We tell ourselves that because we love this person, we should be able to carry everything without feeling the weight of it. But that's simply not true. Love doesn't make us superhuman. It makes us willing, and there's a difference. There were days when I felt emotionally worn out, not because I loved my parents any less, but because watching someone you love struggle is emotionally expensive. You find yourself grieving little losses long before you ever experience the biggest one. You grieve the things they can no longer do, the independence they've lost, and the pieces of life that quietly slip away one by one. That's a kind of grief people don't often talk about. It's a grief that arrives before goodbye. And because the person you love is still here, you don't always feel like you have permission to acknowledge it. If you've experienced that, I hope you'll give yourself a little grace. Feeling tired doesn't mean you're ungrateful. Feeling overwhelmed doesn't mean you're failing. Feeling sad doesn't mean you've lost hope. It simply means you're carrying something heavy. I also hope you'll remember that asking for help isn't a sign that you've reached your limit as a caregiver. It's a sign that you understand you're human. There's incredible strength in saying, "I could use a hand here." There's wisdom in accepting a meal from a friend, letting someone sit with your loved one while you take a walk, or allowing yourself an afternoon to simply breathe. You can't pour from a cup that's constantly empty, and taking care of yourself isn't taking anything away from the person you're caring for. In many ways, it's one of the best gifts you can give them, because it helps ensure you'll have the strength to keep showing up tomorrow. People sometimes ask whether the pain of losing someone ever completely goes away. I don't think that it does. I think it changes. The sharp edges become softer over time, but the love remains just as strong. There are still moments when something happens, and my first thought is, I've got to tell Mom about this. There are days when I catch myself laughing the way she laughed, or saying something that sounds exactly like something my dad would have said. And it reminds me that the people we love never completely leave us. They continue to shape the way we see the world, the way we love other people, and even the way we tell stories. In that sense, they're still here, not in the chair where they used to sit, not across the dinner table, but in us. I think about the sacrifices parents make that children never fully understand until they're grown. We spend years believing they always knew what they were doing, only to discover later that they were figuring it out as they went, just like we are now. Maybe that's one of the greatest gifts caregiving gave me. It allowed me to see my parents not just as mom and dad, but as people. People who worried, who got tired, who made mistakes, people who loved deeply. Seeing them that way didn't make me admire them less. It made me admire them more. As we wrap up today, I want to say something to every caregiver who's listening. Whether you're caring for a parent today, whether you've already walked this road, or whether you're quietly beginning to notice that the roles are changing, I hope you'll remember this. You don't have to do it perfectly. You simply have to do it with love. There will be days when you second-guess yourself. There will be nights when you wonder if you handled something the right way. And there will be moments when you wish you had said something differently or been a little more patient. Those are all parts of loving another human being. Perfection was never the goal. Presence was. Your parents probably don't remember every meal you cooked, every prescription you picked up, or every appointment you drove them to. What they remember is that you were there, that someone loved them enough to keep showing up. And in the end, isn't that what all of us hope for? Not perfection, not fame, not wealth. Just to know that when life became difficult, someone stayed. Someone chose us. Someone loved us enough to walk beside us instead of walking away. If you're fortunate enough to still have your parents, maybe give them a call after this episode. It doesn't have to be a long conversation. Just ask them how they're doing. Listen to another one of those stories you've heard your whole life. Tell them you love them, even if you've said it 1,000 times before. And if your parents are no longer here, I hope you know that the love you gave them still matters. Love doesn't stop because a heartbeat does. It has a remarkable way of continuing through the lives we touch, the stories we tell, and the people we become. I know my parents helped shape the person I am today, and I hope that in some small way, the love they poured into me continues to find its way into the people I meet, the conversations I have, and these moments we share together on this podcast. If this episode reminded you of someone who's quietly caring for a parent, I hope you'll share it with them. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give another caregiver isn't advice. It's simply letting them know that someone else understands. Thanks so much for joining me again for this episode of Say It Anyway. I'm Corey Proffitt-Boyd, and until next time, say it anyway.
Say it anyway with Corey Proffitt-Boyd. Say it anyway. Say it anyway with Corey Proffitt-Boyd.